Hi, I'm Nikki, the Obsessive Bookseller. Welcome to my channel. Today I'd like to review The Winds of Khalakovo by Bradley P. Beaulieu. This is the first book in the Lays of Anaskaya series, and it is going to be a DNF Q&A where I take a really thoughtful look into why the book didn't work for me. And a lot of times this format of review is even more insightful than the books that I loved and raved about. I think it makes it easier for people to decide whether or not this is the type of book that will work for them. I realized the poor timing of this. When I planned everything out, it looked great, but I realized that if you caught my Read, Burn, Hoard post on Tuesday, then you probably already have a pretty good idea on the types of things I'm going to talk about in this review. So if you caught that, there's not going to be a lot of new information in here, so maybe I'll plan a little better next month. In any case, let's get started. Did you really give The Winds of Khalakovo a chance? More so than I normally do a DNF. This one I made it all the way to the 50% mark before deciding to set it down. And I think it was a combination of me being initially really excited to start the book and holding out hope that it would get better, along with having read it for a vlog for my Read, Burn, Hoard. I felt a little bit more pressure to give it a really good go to make sure I absolutely wanted to put it down. Have you enjoyed other books in the same genre before? Considering fantasy is my favorite go-to, yes, absolutely. What I have found though is that beautiful covers can't always be trusted. I went into this one a little apprehensive because the cover was so good, thinking hopefully it'll hold up. Instead of pulling other titles that had a similar storyline or atmosphere or whatever to this one, I decided to pull a few that have, in my opinion, really compelling covers that actually lived up to the potential. Easy Peasy, Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. I think these covers promise just epic, beautiful world building, and even more so with the maps and various illustrations within these tomes. This is still one of my all-time favorite examples on how to do world building well. Totally immersive. I love it when they change the flora and fauna. This one really worked for me, obviously. A relatively recent read, Covenants by Lorna Freeman. I always found the cover really compelling. Non-human main character is very interesting to me. The writing style and main character kind of reminded me of in the same vein as Robin Hobbs, so that's probably why I enjoyed it quite a bit. The world building was cool, the story was really flowing, I quite enjoyed it. An Alchemy of Masks and Mirrors by Curtis Craddock. There's a lot of tiny details in here, also including airships, and in fact, if you liked Winds of Khalakovo, this one's even better. It's like a futuristic, aeronautical take on the Three Musketeers, but with magic and politics, and I thought it was awesome. My sci-fi pick, one of the things I love most about sci-fi is the world building aspect, especially when they're good at creature creation, and no one does it better than biologist turned writer Julie Chernita. I love the pretty blue of this cover. I held on to it for years before finally giving it a try because I'm like, it can't possibly be as good as the cover is making me think it's going to be, but it was. It's awesome. And finally, The Aware by Glenda Lark. And don't laugh at me, this cheesy cover promised to me a lot of unique flora and fauna and an exotic location for the story, and it definitely delivered on those promises. This is one of the funnest series I've ever read. Very unconventional. I think I'd find it hard to actually recommend to other people, but it hit me in the right spot. So yes, there are some books with awesome covers that actually pan out. With The Winds of Khalakovo, the basic ideas and plot was really creative, but he lost me on execution. Did you have certain expectations before starting it? As just mentioned, based on the cover, yeah, I had wild expectations for it. I thought it was going to be so cool, so rich. It promises adventure to me. It promises a little more expansive travel and world building where you're dealing with people from different realms on a bigger scale than just 5 characters. So to me, it was a lot more narrowly focused and did not celebrate what the cover promised. What ultimately made you stop reading? It became clear around the 20% mark that grand politicking, massive adventures, and epic world building wasn't going to feature very heavily in the story. It was a lot of the main character going and having intimate conversations with one character after another, split up by like a tiny half a page action scene, and then they'd proceed to continue talking to one another for the next 50 pages about what happened. So I thought, okay, this is going to be a character-driven novel. I can get behind that. I like character-driven novels, especially if there's some, like, rich politicking between that, which there really wasn't. But what ultimately made me put it down is if the characters are going to be your only selling point to the book, they better be good. But in this case, they were, to me, really thin, not very well explored, and every conversation didn't enhance character. It just left me with more questions, and it didn't really dig into any of the issues that he presented at the beginning of the book as being important to the reader. I think part of the problem was the plot structure. The author held everything like really close to the chest and didn't really let the reader in on basically any of the behind the scenes or character motives. So we'd be introduced to a new character and we would know that they were significant to the character we've been following, but we wouldn't know why. He failed to give the reader a reason to care about what was being presented. And without motive, we don't know if what they're doing is intelligent or not. And so to me, it came across as basically a bunch of really wealthy people squabbling. And without that motive or inner dialogue where the reader understood what was going on, it kept me at arm's distance from really getting to know the characters. And on top of that, the main conflict that was introduced at the beginning with the main character, where we understand his motive completely, and it's highly interesting, as far as I could tell, had not been explored at all by the time I stopped reading the book. So he offered a promise of the conflict that we were going to be following at the beginning and then failed to deliver on it, as far as I could tell. Another thing that added to my disconnection even more was the way the story was written. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't believe it was poorly written. I believe the author was going for a very specific writing style, a very flowery, fanciful dialogue for the characters. And then, in my opinion, unnecessarily wordy sentences, like included a bunch of prepositional phrases, didn't use contractions like can't or wouldn't. And I think it added a good, like 25% of unnecessary text to the story. The dialogue was hard for me, and he even continued it in the way that they thought about things. It was very proper. For me, it was very unrelatable. Because proper to me implies that you've got like your social armor on and you're not letting anybody pass that initial barrier. It's all like caught up in this like shield of formality. And when you continue to do that, even in like the inner thought processes, the reader doesn't get a sense of what the character is actually thinking and feeling. So that felt like a miss. And then I know it's a style choice, and he did it very well, but I don't like those extended sentences. To me, it reads a lot like my 5-year-old's learn how to read books, and so I find it clunky and slightly condescending. I also think it really hurt the pacing of his novel. I might have kept with it had things been revealed a little more quickly, but because he kept everything so close to his chest for so long, I never made it to the payoff. There was not enough information for me to latch on and really care about anything going on in this story. Was there anything you liked about The Winds of Khalakovo? The beginning I was really hopeful because there were a couple of airship scenes that I thought were so good. But they were fleeting and not prominent to the story. I thought the action scenes were quite good, but they were so short. And I am still very interested in the overall conflict that the main character was dealing with at the beginning of the book. And I wanted to know more about that. But even though the reader kind of got some insight into the mechanisms of what was going on with that, the main character didn't take any action to further his knowledge in what was going on. And I don't really care for passive characters. Would you read anything else by this author? Yes, I have read The 12 Kings of Sharakai and liked it a little bit better. At the time, I was wondering if it was a disconnect I had with the author's writing, or if all the flashback scenes were contributing to me not being as into that book as I thought I would be. Now I'm thinking it's probably more the writing style. Him and I just aren't on the same brainwave. But I did like that one enough to go back and reread to eventually continue the series. I also have a short story from him called The Burning Light that I would like to get to as well. So you DNF'd the book. Would you still recommend it? Surprisingly, yes. I don't think the thick language would bother as many people as it did me, and some people really enjoy the type of plots where nothing is made easy for the reader, and they live for those really drawn out big reveals. And the overall atmosphere was cool enough that I think it would keep more patient readers than I engaged a lot longer, especially if they enjoyed the characters more than I did. So this was not a poorly written book. It was just completely opposite than everything that I personally want out of my stories. So that wraps up my review. I hope you found the Q&A format helpful. Let me know if you've read this book and how you found it. Like, I'm wondering if I'm just out on an island of disappointment, not having liked it, but everybody else who's read it thought it was amazing. Thank you so much for joining me for this review, and I hope to catch you next time.